I'm Scott, and with me, Toby.
Hello.
What are we covering this week, Toby?
Well, this week we are covering the second part of, or the second short story in this collection of short stories by Stephen King called Four Past Midnight. So yes, it's the second story. It is titled, I believe it's Secret Window.
Is it a secret window, secret garden?
Yes, that's it. Shorter than the Langoliers, which is what we reviewed last week. And the film stars Johnny Depp and John Turturro.
You've seen the film before?
I've seen it before, yes. Which is a question I want to ask you. Because you haven't seen the film, but you've read the book, obviously.
Yes. I didn't know this film existed until you told me about it last week, I guess.
Yeah. I watched a couple of reviews.
Big star cast, right? It's Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
I'm guessing pre-Pirates.
It was on the back of. It was released on the back of like 2 months after Pirates of the Caribbean. They brought it back a month forward to capitalise on his fame because of Johnny Depp, because of Captain Jack Sparrow. And I think that you could see elements of Captain Jack Sparrow in Mort Rainey's performance, or Johnny Depp's performance as Mort Rainey in the film as well. It's quite wacky.
Okay, I'm not really sure what to make of that. The short story, at least, didn't really require wackiness.
No, well, it did. Yeah,
it felt quite a somber one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you want to synopsisize?
Yeah. Well, so first thoughts for me. I didn't know anything about this, so it was kind of nice going into. But there's an intro by King, and so he's already talking about what it's going to be about a little. And we kind of covered something similar in Dark Half, and this book does cover the same ground. So it was pretty looking forward to reading it, and I guess it's the first one in a while I've known so little about.
Yeah. Well, I was excited for you, to be honest. I hadn't read it. I think I've already said, but I hadn't read the story before, but I'd seen the film. So I came into the story knowing everything.
Oh, okay. Like seeing the film version.
Yeah, which for me made it less of an enjoyment to read.
Right, that's often the case, right? Like, I find it really hard to read the book after I've seen the film.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something I particularly want to read, if I've seen the film, I need to give it a good few years. And the better that film was, the more I need to give it, because it's just the vividness. And
but then that wasn't necessarily true for The Shining or The Ring. When I saw The Ring, and then I read the book.
No, but do you not find you're waiting for those beats, whether they come or not? And sometimes they're surprised, but sometimes they're mildly disappointing. And sometimes you're just anticipating things, whether they come or not, which kind of could throw you off.
I think the biggest problem with this one was the fact that it relies heavily on a twist.
Right. I can see that.
The twist. So I was reading it knowing the twist.
I did see that coming.
You did?
Yeah. But it does feel like you're meant to. It's like you're meant to feel your way through this.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll cover.
Were you onto it? Did you know that the end was the end before you went into reading it?
What?
Did you know that Mort Rainey was Shooter?
Before the reveal, but not going into the book. Like throughout the story, you're given little
nods,
hints, but just the way the story is going, it kind of leaves you no choice.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Okay, so go on then. Summarise.
So we start with Mort Rainey, and he is living in his summer house, and he's newly divorced, and he is a writer, a somewhat well-received writer.
Successful enough to not have to work ever again.
No, he's full-time writer. He doesn't have a side job or anything. And the film kind of starts with a go, which was pretty nice. He basically wakes up from a dream and there is a knock on the door, and there's a man he's never seen before, and he accuses him of stealing his idea, of stealing his story. And this man's name is John Shooter. And so the conversation ensues, and he's not really worried particularly. He's a bit bemused, but he thinks this man is kind of harmless and doesn't really know who he is or where he's coming from. And I think he often says, like, because he was just woken up, he's pretty disarmed, but he's not. He's not taking it seriously, but he's not really
focused. Yeah.
Mm. And the man storms off and leaves something for him, and that what he left for him was his manuscript, a short story called Secret Garden, Secret Window, which is where the title comes from. He doesn't read it, he throws it away, but his maid thinks it's one of his. He's a writer, and so just pulls it aside, thinking it was there by mistake. And this time around, he does glimpse through it, and the more he looks, it is almost an exact story of something he wrote a long time ago.
Similarities are two.
Yeah. So, am I right in this? The man then Shooter calls him up, or I can't remember if this conversation happened live or he phones him up. But basically, Mort says, I have proof. Like, they're talking, and he says, when did you write this? Yeah. And he says,
they meet at the cars, don't they? And they have the argument at the cars.
Right, which means I'm skipping. So I think that night he finds his cat nailed to a dustbin. And that's when he sort of realizes that Mort is a dangerous guy. There's a sort of rethink to Shooter's personality. What he took as like quiet and unassuming, he's now thinking was something a bit more dark and scary. Yeah. And his cat died. So I think I've got that the right way around. I might have had that into earlier.
Relatively close, yeah.
They meet down by a lake, and Shooter basically is pretty aggravated, but the conversation is actually pretty calm between them nonetheless. They get a lot out.
Simmering anger, but then never quite. It's always coming to the boil, but never quite boils throughout that whole.
And so Mort basically asks, when did you write this story? And when he tells him, I guess he says around 82 or something, he sort of thinks he has him, because he's like, well, mine was released 2 years before that. Yeah. So there's evidence. And it's a short story that was published in a kind of magazine annual.
Yeah, and then re-released a couple of years later as a part of a compilation of short stories.
Right. So Shooter basically says, okay, I'm going to give you 3 days to prove it.
When I was the longest 3 days ever.
Yeah, it's a bit arduous. It seems, I guess it's just the timer for the story. It does seem crazy that this man just gave him 3 days, but that's how it goes. And then that very night, he calls up his ex-wife, and she's sort of, I think she's engaged all day, so he can't get through to her. Yeah. And then because his office is still at the old house, so he has copies of this magazine in that house. Yeah. And so when she finally calls him, she's in hysterics because the house has been burnt down by someone. So he's obviously thinking it is Shooter, but he's pushing it down a lot. He jumps to that conclusion, but he also thinks he's being silly.
Yeah, there's a kind of benefit of the doubt thing going on, isn't there?
Right, there's distance and time, and how could he possibly know?
How could he have stapled my cat to the wall and then driven all the way down there and back again?
Right,
my house, my cat's still warm from.
Yeah. So his instinct is telling it's him, but his head is sort of saying that's not really possible. Yeah. So he heads down to the old house, and we meet his wife, Amy. Yeah. and her new partner, Ted, and then there's some awkwardness between them.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, because they're separate.
She started having an affair with this guy whilst they were still married.
Yeah.
And slowly throughout the story, we get that like a little bit of the story of how he found them. So we start off by just knowing that he walked in on them one day, and then like the next time we come around to that story, you know, he walked in and some of the conversation is released, and I guess that's part of the climax too. Is what unfolded there. But they also meet up with an insurance guy who is just asking them, you know, what they had at the house.
Yeah, like totaling everything up, isn't he?
Yeah, and this guy's Fred, and I guess he's pretty straight down the line.
Yeah.
There's some pretty awkward writing in this, but we'll come back to that. So then Mort goes home, and he has a caretaker called Greg, and it doesn't really explain who this guy is, but he basically, like, I thought he was some sort of private eye. I had to go back and double check who he was, but he is the caretaker of his summer house. And so he basically tells him the whole story and asks him to look around for this shooter guy. And it comes forward that there was a witness to the two talking on the lake.
Drove past in the car at the same time.
Yeah, and this guy is Tom.
Tom, yeah.
Right. And I'm pretty sure that's all the characters.
There's a Scotty guy or something like that, isn't there? The guy that paints the walls and everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's Tom, actually. No, that's Tom. He's the guy.
Right, yeah, he's the sort of witness.
Yeah.
But when the caretaker asks Tom what he saw, basically Tom swears that he didn't see anything. He only saw Mort on his own, which kind of freaks Mort out. And Mort sort of reacts instantly with Shooter must have got to him and he's threatening him.
Yeah.
Which leads Greg to say, well, I guess he was acting strange, but I didn't press it.
Yeah.
And throughout this, Mort starts having dreams, like more and more vivid dreams.
Yeah, he's sleeping a lot, isn't he?
Yeah. So where do we go from here? I'm a little lost.
So basically, after that, because this guy's like, I didn't see him, and more besides with the other guy, I think is it his caretaker or the sheriff or someone to go down. You're gone quiet, Scott. I can't hear you. Greg, the caretaker. Yeah, so he decides to meet the guy that said he didn't see anything with the other guy just to check it out. And then he goes in the morning to meet them, but they're not there. They don't turn up. And then he goes to find somebody else who knows where they might be. And then
of course, right. And the trail leads them, I guess, onto his grounds. And he thinks he sees them both in the car talking. And when he gets close, they're both dead. Yeah. I think. Yeah. They're both dead separately. One has like a screwdriver and then one has a hammer in the back of his head. And so he goes home and he's pretty sure Shooter's in the house. And I guess there's a key scene where he bursts into a bathroom and he sees Shooter and he's attacking him, but it kind of just turns out to be a mirror, and he just sort of in a haze just saw the reflection and smashed it up. And then he goes to sleep. He sort of passes out, I guess. And when he wakes up with the car coming in. Yeah. And he's basically tormented himself. No, I think I've gone wrong again. Yeah, so...
Yeah, the magazine's being sent up, isn't it, by his mate, his publisher?
Oh, of course. Sorry, yeah, that's another key thing we're hanging on was he had another copy of the magazine being sent, which he's waiting for, and it's arriving at 10 in the morning, and he was arriving at like 10 past 10 in the morning or something. And this is the proof that will just, end this whole story.
Shooter off his back. He has to go down and pick it up from the FedEx post office, basically.
Right, and he hasn't told the police about the bodies just because I guess
he killed it himself.
Yeah, they're on his property. It's all his tool. Like everything was his.
Yeah.
The hammer that was used to kill was taken from his tool shed. So when he gets home, he finally checks the magazine, and it's basically been cut out. His story is missing, and the contents page that would have his name is missing, and he kind of loses it. And this is where we get the reveal. It's done in quite an odd way, right? It just sort of says he realized he was Shooter. Like there's no sort of edginess or tension. It just suddenly tells you, matter of factly, that
all pieces fall into place, and he's just like bam, 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 bam. Oh God!
But it's a very quick revelation for him that he is Shooter, and he thinks about how tired he was the day after his wife's house burnt down, thinking that he could be that tired because he was up all night driving. I guess certain cuts on him from attacking the guys.
Yeah, his limbs are hurting and everything because he was attacking these guys.
Right. And so he hears a car come, and he thinks he's saved. He thinks that Shooter has arrived.
Yeah.
And it just makes everything okay, because obviously he was thinking that he killed the two people, the cat, the house, and that he was just going insane. But now the car has arrived.
Shooter's here.
Shooter.
Yeah.
And he runs out, and it's his wife. And he tells her to get away, but not really clearly. He kind of runs into the house, I guess, to try and lock himself away. And she comes in and just sees the house is a mess. Like, Shooter is written everywhere. Like, it's just like he's been living like a crazy person for weeks. And when she finds him, Mort's not there. It's Shooter. He kind of has a southern twang. He has a Mississippi accent, and he just talks differently.
Yeah, he has a full twist, basically, doesn't he? He becomes the other person.
Yeah, he's now embodiment of Shooter, who goes after Amy. There's a lot of resentment and bitterment for the divorce.
Yeah,
and they start fighting. And through all of this, we're getting the backstory of what everything means. We're getting these flashbacks, and we understand where the secret window garden story theft came from. That when he was in a writing class, he was at the top of the class, and then another boy joined who was really young but was really good. And he was only there for like a half term, but everything he did was just stunning. And then he left. And then years later, Mort was over and over trying to get published in a magazine, but just getting rejected. And in his head, they were kind of toying with him.
Yeah.
Because they sent him encouraging letters, but he kind of took them, in his head, he twisted it that they were making fun of him. So he, just going through old classwork, finds the story that this old classmate wrote, and he kind of sends it in as a joke. He kind of thinks, I'll send them this, and when they accept it, I'll tell them, no, you can't publish it.
Yeah.
And they do accept it, and he does publish it, and that's kind of his first break.
Yeah. And that's kind of that is what leads to this underlying guilt.
Yeah, this is the snap, right? And so he kind of instantly felt bad. He gave the money away, but it was kind of too late. And then I think after a while, he did start writing his own stories, and everything was his, but that guilt was always there. And I think they say at the end that the person who wrote that story never knew. So he sort of took his own guilt out on himself, right? He punished himself. Yeah. And we kind of learned that fairly recently he was about to have a huge movie deal with one of his books, and it fell through. And his wife sort of says he had a nervous breakdown, but he sort of says he was close, but he didn't. And we also then learned that when he burst in on his wife with her then lover, that he had a gun and it was loaded, and he was just brandishing it around. So when we're back in the room, he's about to kill her, and out of nowhere, there's a shot, and the dialect kind of changes just for a second, and I guess we're meant to believe that Mort comes back just before his moment of death and dies. And then we cut to the epilogue, which I don't know, this wasn't my favourite structure, but so it goes. We find out that the insurance investigator, Fred, there's a lot of investigation here. I think when the house burnt down, like there was a Molotov cocktail of a champagne bottle, and in the repertoire was champagne and fingerprints, and he just had the instinct when she said she was going there to kind of follow. And we learn Amy and Ted got happily married. I guess the name Shooter, is it John Shooter? Yeah. Was an amalgamation of a lot of the psychosis things happening to him. The name of a town where the lover came from, and was the name of the guy he told the story from. And then I think the one last twist is that there was a further interview with Fred, the witness, who said he only saw one person when he saw two. And it goes in to say that he looked after his wife when she was sick and was sort of had Alzheimer's and losing her memory. And the reason he didn't tell what he saw was because he was either going crazy or he was worried that he was going through it. And that was that he did see two people, but one of them was a ghost. Yeah. He was semi-transparent. And another twist, I suppose, is that when Amy's cleaning the house, she throws the hat away that he always wore when he was Shooter. And the next day she comes downstairs and it's still there with a note in it saying, "Sorry for all the mess, got my story, I'm going now." Yeah. I don't know why he put that there. And that's kind of the end, right? It's not, kind of wraps up. I'd say it wraps up too much, but that is Secret Garden, Secret Window. Yeah. The title is from the short story he stole from, which was a little disappointing. I thought there was going to be much more of this story. I'm not going to lie. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Wait, did I miss anything first?
No, that's pretty much, almost it in a roundabout way.
I think there's some unusual detail missed out, I'm sure. But
it was. I don't know. I struggled with reading it. Although I read it quickly for me, I definitely struggled with reading it. I found it very boring at times.
I mean, it's very contained. I'll give it that.
Yeah. All the stuff in the middle with the going to New York and meeting up with Ted and the family stuff and the things, and
for under 200 pages, there was a lot of travel.
And a lot of description. It was very description heavy at times. Like I didn't need to know about some of the stuff that I was being told in that short story.
Right. I found some of the dialogue and writing horribly stilted. I did put some bookmarks in, but they all fall out, so I'm going to paraphrase some. I just kind of reminded me of, I don't know, 50s serial sort of stuff. There was an instance where he's talking with the house insurance guy, but they're all there. So his wife is there, and Ted and Fred are there, and the new husband is basically looking at the itinerary, and Mort is like, "Hey, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be looking at this." Yeah. And so Fred says, "Oh yeah, it's okay. No one else is meant to look at it, but we often do that with a wink. But it seems to me like Mort here minds." And he replies, "Yes, Mort does mind." I don't know, that third person reference just sprung out, but it wasn't really with sort of it wasn't sardonic. It was sort of trying to be frustrated and real. And I think there was, the only one I can remember is when he was he fell asleep trying to write, and it was something along the lines of the hours he tried to write was many, the words none.
Yeah. I remember that.
Something just stuck out as I don't know. Did you need to have it that way around?
Yeah. You're right about that. That's a good shout.
There was a few. Those are the two that I remember, but there was a good few. Which, I mean, it's interesting because this became before the Dark Half, right? And I do wonder what his publisher said when he said, "I'm going to kind of revisit this, but make it full length." I guess he did the right switches because we are with Mort through this whole story, apart from the epilogue, and he's not particularly likable.
No, he's not.
I guess it makes sense why in the end. I must admit, when the reveal and the clues kind of came to light, it was quite enjoyable to read.
Was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Because you don't
seeing all the things come together. I mean, a lot of the reveals he commented on throughout it, but the character Mort is often fighting with his instincts and his head, saying this must just be a coincidence. I think at one point, fairly early on, there's even like a bullet point list of the coincidences, which he kind of writes off but makes note of. Yeah, I mean, it's all there. It's not that interesting. I guess it's only a short. It's under 200 pages, so it gets away with it.
For a film, though, would you agree?
Oh, so is the film? I mean, I guess I can see a film there, but
the film does it justice. I watched a trailer which rejogged my memory about what the film is.
Does it stick to the same beats and finale?
Similar to the book, to the point where there's a part in the film where Johnny Depp has a stare down with a squirrel.
Yeah, that does happen.
Which happens in the book. So it's very similar to the Langoliers in its recreation, faithfulness.
But then the Langoliers, that loyalty didn't really pan out so well, right?
No. But the film is polarized.
I can imagine it being played more as a taunt thriller than a sort of mystery that we have. I mean, I guess what kind of could have been nice was if the guy wasn't him and was a real guy, and where and how that turns out.
That's exactly it.
What's the actual reason to get that low?
Yeah, the general consensus is that the book is really good up until the point where you find out that he's not real. And it just becomes silly.
Even when this was written, which would have... So this was released in the 90s? In 1990?
90s, yeah. Possibly.
So it was written somewhere in the late 80s, I imagine. I think even for then, it was him all along was probably kind of a cliche, right?
Yeah, you would have thought, 1990. Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't my favourite one I've ever read, that's for sure.
No, I mean, there's a little intro to it, which I really liked, where the title came from at least. And he said that there is, I think it was a laundry room house, and you can never really get into the back of it because of a boiler and a washing machine. It's just a sort of storeroom. But at the back, there's a tiny window. One day while just cleaning out, he just edged through to this window and he could see his garden from an angle that just he's never really seen it from. And I really like that idea. Yeah. I kind of thought just from that description that we were going to get something more, I don't know, from another dimension. You know what I mean? I thought it was going to be some kind of seeing the future through a secret window. I guess I took that introduction and the title in a strange literal sense. Yeah. So I guess what was happening was a nice surprise, but also kind of a dull surprise. It was enjoyable, but so, it was just...
The thing for me is that because I knew what was coming or what was happening, I found it a double a slog to get through, probably more than I would have done if I didn't know anything. And for you, from my perspective, you actually quite enjoyed it and picked up the twist, but didn't quite get it fully, I guess, until you were in it, in the thick of it.
Yeah, I mean, do you ever care about Morty?
No.
And
I don't care about any of them already.
Kind of a key thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, that's the problem.
Dishevelled mess from the get-go, and he stays a dishevelled mess pretty much, like harangued and on the edge of insanity. He's kind of like what Jack Torrance is in Kubrick's version of The Shining over King's version of The Shining, I think. Like on the edge already.
In the movie version or the book version?
No, in the Mort Rainey in the book is Stanley Kubrick's version of Jack Torrance, as it were.
Oh, okay. So he's already, well, I guess by the time we meet him, he's past the edge. We and he just doesn't know it. I see. Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I read some pretty interesting trivia about some of inspiration, and he has had I guess every writer of immense success is going to get accusations of plagiarization. And I think there was a particular woman who has just accused him about 9 times.
Really? I didn't know that.
Of plagiarizing certain stuff. And they've all been instantly thrown out.
Yeah.
But I guess this one stands out because it's the same woman with multiple stories. Mm-hmm. And I think at one point in his life, someone broke into his house and his wife found him, and he said that the plot of Misery was taken from his auntie, and he had a shoebox, which he said was a bomb. And it turned out to be, I guess, just a guy who's not all with it. And it wasn't a real bomb, but someone breaking into a house with a shoebox and saying it's a bomb is terrifying.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'll pass on that one.
Right. So I'm guessing a lot of the inspiration of this came from fans who insist their stories theirs.
I think that like you said, plagiarism is the biggest thing, isn't it? A fear of a writer is always worrying about plagiarism because apparently there's only so many stories in the world, and then it's just a retelling of that story in your own.
I mean, I've read a few, and it's just, I mean, what are some of the famous ones? I guess Hunger Games and Battle Royale. Mm-hmm. I kind of like them both, and there's room enough for both, and it's not that original a concept to say that this was mine. I don't even think they were the first. Isn't kind of Running Man, which is King, kind of Lord of the Flies-ish. Okay, maybe not, but just the concept is pretty vague, and it runs very differently in those stories. The one that puts me on edge, I suppose, is The Life of Pi, and so there's a short story called Max and the Cats, and it is about a guy sailing to New York, I think post-Holocaust, and he ends up on a life raft with a live jaguar. It's a really short story. Seymour Montclair. It's pretty sweet, but this came long before
Life of
Pi, and they have been to court, and I think it was an out-of-court settlement. But I do believe that the after result that is tangible is that at the front of all the copies of Life of Pi, it says, for the spark of life, to Seymour Montclair for the spark of life. Like, he had to acknowledge where they came from. So that's a tricky one, right? Because that's a very specific idea. Yeah. Getting caught on a lifeboat with a big cat. And Life of Pi takes it a lot further. I really like that book. It's got, and Max and the Cat is nice, but it's just a short that starts and ends within less than 100 pages. Yeah. So I don't know where you're allowed to sort of claim something, or I don't know what the matter is. If someone's good idea, I'm gonna take it and make it my own and extend it, right? Because Under the Dome has been done by everyone and anyone. Mm-hmm. Then what counts as original idea? How based you have to go?
Exactly. It's like the story I'm trying to, my gnome story. That's
you have to give a bit of explanation on that one.
Yeah, it's a bit like Lord of the Rings. It's a bit like so many other things. There's always elements of something. As soon as you match up a gnome with a wolf or something, oh that's like, or this is like, and you're like, well, yeah,
but especially now, I guess we're in such a saturated world where it's not just the best of the best authors or semi-good authors getting published. With self-publishing, anyone who wants to publish can, somewhere or another, and that idea is out there.
Yeah.
Whether you've read it or not.
Yeah. So yes, out of 5, was it 5 or 10? What were we marking? 10. Secret Window, Secret Garden, I would give 4.5.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you on that one. I mean, it was. If I hadn't read this, I wouldn't feel like I was missing it.
No.
There was very little fun to it.
Yeah.
And the suspense was kind of low.
For me, and the reason I give it so low is because I knew this. I ruined it by watching the film before reading the book. So I was always just going through it, looking or waiting.
But does that bode unwell for your future of King reading? Because you've seen a fair amount of his movies, which you haven't read the books, and some of them, like for example,
twists.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess this was such a short that, they might as well stick to it, I suppose, or they don't have to cut stuff out like in it or one of the longer ones.
It shows to me, I think, that it's better to read the book first and then watch the film than watch the film and read the book.
Yeah, I think that's the general rule, right? Because you have to put more time and work into the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like there's more payoff.
Yeah.
The film you can half-heartedly watch but still pick up on it, or you can literally put your time in, which is an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, and be done.
I definitely found that when reading it, I drift more. I'd have to go back and read a couple of paragraphs that I'd already looked over because I hadn't actually been reading it. I'd just been skimming it with my eyes, but thinking about something completely different.
Okay, so
but that happened with the Langoliers.
I mean, I think that, I don't know if it happened twice. When, like I said, when we were introduced to the gardener and the way he talks to him, I thought he was some sort of private investigator. I had to go back to check who this guy was.
Yeah.
And in the end, when he gets shot, I had to double check, who was that? Because you're not told who it was.
No.
It sort of comes later in the epilogue.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, there's a lot of explanation in that epilogue, which felt like they could have done a smooth run and put it in the story live than an afterthought, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't really know why that was tacked on the end. Well, not tacked on, but just why that was divulged after the post big reveal.
Yeah.
But that's what we get.
Yeah, I don't think I have a problem watching any. Well, no. I'll be happy with. It was just this one, I think, just because of the twist that I found.
Right, you saw coming. It's like seeing Sixth Sense when someone's already told you.
Yeah, exactly that. So next week's one is hopefully The Library Policeman. No, I know nothing about this at all.
Oh, yeah. So this is the first one we're both going to be reading when neither of us knows.
No, I've got no idea what it's about. I didn't even know it existed until we opened this book up, basically, to the Langoliers.
I do know it's set in a library, and that's cool. I do have, like, if there's a story or a book set in a bookstore or a library, I will.
Yeah,
it's something I'll dig. I do like that as a setting. There's not that many, considering.
No. Time Traveler's Wife is.
Right. He works. Kafka on the Shore.
Yeah. On the Shore.
Yeah. Is it Mr. Pembra's 24-hour bookstore?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there is a good few, but there's not, an oversaturation of it.
No. So there we go.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. You're going to have to write spoiler alert because we keep forgetting to say it at the beginning. So, retroactive spoiler alert. And thanks for listening.
Yeah. Cheers.
See you next week.
Next week. The Library Policeman.